Hello again. The topic I am going to talk about is true for all of the teachings of the Buddha, but I'm going to talk about one particular example of that principle, which is the repulsiveness of the body. Now, there was a sutta I read some years ago, and I thought it was like really odd at the moment because I was taught that this, asubha practice is in order to like an antidote to lust. It is for when you are lust. It's for to manage lust. It's active lust. When you have that, you do this asubha practice to just reduce, get rid of that. But there was a sutta, and the Buddha says, he describes the people in the Sangha, and he says, there are arahants in the Sangha who dwell contemplating the repulsiveness of the body, which is really interesting in a lot of ways. First of all, arahants are not liable to lust. Why would they need to do that practice? And second of all, if it is a kind of practice which is usually taught, just go through this list, verbally and visualize these body parts, um, are the arhants like doing that all the time? I mean, why would they do that? It doesn't make really any sense. It didn't make any sense to me at that moment. But yeah, in time you come to understand the nature of the teachings are really like that. So you are not accustomed to the subtleties of the mind. It's translated as the sign of the mind. The mind is completely invisible to you. You need something like very palpable. The Buddha talks about these aspects and directions of the mind, but you're just drawing a blank. You're clueless about that. So you interpret that into something more palpable. I think this is like very common, misinterpretation of the teachings. So, and the say, if you don't see the sign of the mind, none of the teachings apply to you. You can't have, right view. You can't have any. You can't understand any of the teachings if you don't see the sign of the mind. So, in order to do that, you need to be restrained and dwell in solitude for a long time. There is no way around that. So let's continue. What is repulsiveness of the body and how do you practice it? So like any of the teachings really, or any of the perceptions the Buddha talks about, these are not like something you actively like do. These are like the themes that the mind just dwells in, so to speak. Just the theme just pervades the mind. Like he talks about Brahma Viharas, like 1/4 of the mind pervades in friendliness, 1/4 of the mind equanimity. I mean, he's talking about this state of, let's say, enlightened mind. It's just describing different aspects of the dwelling of the enlightened mind. It is not like an active, practice you send direct this very positive thoughts or something. Not, it's not like that. So, and the way into um, applying those teachings really going to becoming sensitive to the mind. Okay, in order to apply any of the like somewhat higher teachings than restraint, you need to get sensitive to those aspects, the subtle leanings of the mind. So let's say you have been restraining and reflecting and being, sensitive, being accustomed to the subtleties of the mind, and you, then what happens? And you have been gaining insight. What will happen is sensuality will lose its grasp on you. Okay, and there are more options will be available to you. Previously, none of them were available to you other than sensuality. For example, you were in the domain of sensuality and you were trying to like practice this asuba. I mean, you are just forcing yourself. Your perception. There was this perception of beautiful, and you're forcing to pace it over. Oh no, exactly. Trying to force it, but it's not really how it works at all. Perception of ugly is underneath the beautiful. You don't paste ugly over the beautiful. You first let go of the, perception of beautiful and safe and pleasurable. That aspect. These are not words. This is just a description of that direction, that mental direction, meaning. When your mind just drops that, okay, that zeal and passion, when it drops that, then the other directions will be available, apparent, okay. And what are those other directions? So what remains beneath that zeal and passion towards sensuality? When the mind becomes somewhat free of that, and you get a more, baseline level of, let's say, reality or your experience, you are just floating above this, pleasure and pain on that domain. You are not more grounded now. And what remains, the body, the reality of the body, makes you just nauseous or somewhat repulsed by it. You have this disgust, somewhat slight disgust, or even Tsuta says revulsion. What remains underneath, what appears underneath that. That's not like something you actively arouse. You're not just making yourself disgusted or something. That's the natural attitude. Okay, when you drop lust, the nature of things are just ugly, even repulsive. So, but according to the suttas, it is not. That's not something negative. It's not something bad in itself. It can be like turned pathological, was done by some monks, by overtly, if you just focus on the overtly, the aversion aspect, you can just make yourself very depressed with regard to the state of things, but in itself it is not really depressing. It is just, and if you have this perception of danger with regard to sensuality too, let's say you drop that sensuality, but it is just over there on the corner, just waiting for you to, as an option. It's still available. Unless you are an arahant or something, it's still available as an option to pick it up again. So this perception of repulsiveness, that protects you actually against sensuality. You can, dwell on that theme of repulsive, not by just going through the list of parts or something. You can just make the theme pervasive, pervade your mind in that theme of disgust. Sensuality will have a lot more harder time to reach to you. And that's a skillful state, as the Buddha taught, From the point of view of sensuality, that's something very bad, because it is not conducive to sensuality, but it's conducive to nibbana, cooling down. It is cooling down the passion, that underlying tendencies. It is stilling them, stilling those sankharas. It's how you train, and this is true for all of the other, perceptions, dwellings the Buddha talked about. They are not these palpable things that you can just attend and focus or something. They're just themes that the mind can pervade in.